All right. All right, so we're going to get started up because it's top of the hour and it's St. Patrick's Day and all the fun stuff going on. You got the NCAA tournament, so we're not going to hang around and get going tonight. So this is another Think with a Drink. That's the weekly webinar series brought to you by the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education. And tonight we're doing what it's St. Patrick's Day. We're calling Blarney, which is financial myths and other investing falsehoods. And by that, we're just some things that you might have either heard or had or thought and said, gee, it's just the way I've always done it. And whether or not that's actually something that makes sense in the great grand scheme of everything. So Greg and I will go through that and we'll touch on those. So first, a little pre-flight checklist. We are recording the event, but only what is being shown on the screen is what is being quoted. So don't worry about either your camera, your image, or your name. I just keep the microphones muted at all times. There is a chat box. So if you do have questions about something that we bring up, feel free to throw it in the chat box. My co-pilot will be there to sort of answer them, throw them out as we're going along. And we will have Q&A at the end if necessary. So quickly about us, I'm Tom Alessi. I'm the president of the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education. I'm an investment advisor. I've been doing that for 23 years. It means I act as a fiduciary whenever I'm giving guidance or advice to any of my clients. I want to bring my vice president in. Craig, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Craig Richardson, vice president of the ARIES Foundation. I've been doing this a little over 18 years now, and I specialize in working with families and small businesses to help them develop a plan and have a better relationship with their money.
So yeah, I updated the slide. It says 18 now. See?
I know, I got a year older.
And it's very funny. I didn't even think of it. It's St. Patrick's Day. I put a green background. I did not even make that connection until just this moment in time.
Wow.
Yes, it's a kismet type of thing, right? So we told you Think with a Drink is brought to you by the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education. You can visit us at www.ariesfoundation.org. Our mission is trying to help everyone have a better relationship with their money. Because whether you realize it or not, you are in a relationship with your money. And just like every other personal relationship that you might have, there are behaviors and emotional triggers that cause us to act irrationally when dealing with our money and our finances. All Craig and I and the mission of ARIES try to do is try to help take some of that emotion out. And that might be a little bit of what goes into tonight's sort of presentation, where some of it might be stuff that I've been doing or just been done or told to do all along, and I never really thought about it. Not going to read through the disclosures, just know we're a nonprofit organization. This is all meant to be educational and informational. And one thing that Craig and I stress to everybody is that if you do ever have any questions, whether they are legal, tax, or professional or investment, always seek the help of a professional whenever asking those questions. Okay, so that was a lot of talking for me. This is St. Patrick's Day, so what a better time to have Think with a Drink. We love it that it's falling on a fun holiday for this, and I can't wait for in a couple of weeks when Cinco de Mayo comes on and I can start pumping margaritas into me in terms of going through this. We'll do like Yo Soy Fiesta for that one or something. Yeah. But anyway, it is St. Patrick's Day, so I am drinking Guinness. However, this is Guinness Baltimore Blonde, and a real weird twist of things. It is Guinness, but it's Guinness brewed in Baltimore, Maryland, and it's a blonde ale based off a blonde American. So fairly light, but supposed to be fairly crisp. Craig, what are you drinking tonight?
I'm actually drinking a Guinness that you gave me, a draft stout, which is actually from Dublin, Ireland.
So you got the real Guinness.
I got the real Guinness.
And I changed it to be the European version. Cheers.
Cheers. Holy crap. Had a Guinness accident there.
That can happen. You got to watch out for that. Okay. So our agenda for tonight, we're going to do the truth behind financial myths, a little bit of that, right? What we call Would You Believe, investing falsehoods, and ways to educate yourself around some of these issues, right? So the thing with financial myths is it's not really so much that some of them, yes, can be considered myths or these things that are out there, but sometimes it's this is just what I've always been told, or this is what I heard, or more to the point, this is what the previous generation had been doing, i.e. your parents were doing this or told to do this, and they passed it on to you. And you've just, kept that going, whether you want to call it a reason, a tradition, or whatever. And it just, sometimes this happens, we never really take the time to say, gee, is that really the right thing to be doing? Or could I be doing this a different way or a little better, right, Craig?
Yeah, that's correct. We kind of get stuck in our routines of how things get done. And because we got everything else going on in our life, sometimes this doesn't get adjusted or we deal with some of these issues.
Right. Okay, so the first one we're going to throw out, and we're sort of calling it, would you believe, right? Owning a home is always better than renting, right? So that's sort of the thing that we've been told, right? The American dream, right? The whole, the idea and the concept is I've got to own a home, all right? Or, rent is just throwing money away, ultimately. That's what we're always told. Now, yes, in the long run, purchasing a home can be a better thing, especially if you're planning to be in the home for, a long period of time, like 15, 20 years or so, yes. But if you're in a situation where you're not necessarily going to be there for a long period, maybe it's the job, geographical, whatever the case may be, it's like a 3 to 5 year time span, renting may actually be the better way to go, right? It's because you could basically end up doing better, especially if you get into some place like, what is that, rent controlled, Craig? What do they call that?
Right. Yeah. Rent control. Like if you're in a city or something along those lines. Right. So you may rent as opposed to buying the apartment or whatever that you're living in. The other thing too, Tom, is sometimes you just don't want to deal with the maintenance of owning a property.
That's another part of it, right? There's all the other things that go along with home ownership. And if you're talking about like condo where you get HOA fees and other things that go on there, but yeah, the maintenance, the upkeep, all that other stuff, that adds up over time. And depending on where you are, real estate taxes, etc.
As you're younger, you may be willing and wanting to do some of that outdoor activity or that maintenance on the property. But as you get older, you may be willing, but the body's not. And so as you get older, you may want to transition from, maybe owning to renting.
Right. And I think for us, the idea, the positioning here is that it's not necessarily the end all be all. Like everybody's specific situation, time frame, all of that factors in here, that it shouldn't be like, well, gee, I've got to go buy a piece of property, or I don't feel successful until I have a home type of thing. That's where the myth comes in. So don't let yourself get caught up in that if you're in that situation. Just know, yes, ultimately that may be the goal, but you're better off trying to plan to that goal than getting yourself in a situation where all of a sudden you're in over your head and it becomes undaunting and you're not able to keep up with it. And that's when that whole eviction and foreclosure and all that stuff happens.
Don't feel overly stressed by the American dream is what you're saying?
Yeah, so yeah, no. I mean, let's face it, it caused the housing bubble, the market to crash. So we won't go down that road in terms of all right. So the other one is all debt is bad, right? So if I have debt, it's a terrible thing. Now, Craig and I do this whole thing on debt and debt reduction and trying to get out of debt, but there is actually good debt. Now, we just said about home ownership, a mortgage tends to be good debt because it's an investment that supposedly and usually does grows over time, right, Greg?
I mean, I would define, good debt is anything where you're leveraging somebody else's money to put yourself in a better position, right? So you can't just go out and maybe buy a house in cash. So you're leveraging the bank's money so that you can put yourself in the house and you can pay it over time. It may be the same thing. You start a business, you take a business loan. Now you're leveraging somebody else's money so that you can start a business and build an asset. So any of those types of leverage type debt, that's not necessarily bad debt as long as it's having in a positive direction.
Right. Same thing with a student loan. You're improving yourself. The idea of getting a better job, all of that. So, the idea is also but you have to sort of take that with a little bit of, let's not get crazy about it and, get ourselves, where we're taking on too much debt Or, hey, I wanted to buy the house, but, instead of buying the $500,000 house, I'm buying the $1 million home. And now I've got to deal with twice the payments and all of that stuff. So there is that sort of alleyway, if you will, of trying to figure out. But it's more to the point that, a lot of times you'll hear out there, well, if you have any debt, it's bad, right? You got to clear all the debt off the table. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more in a couple of slides. I can use my credit cards as my emergency funds. This is more to say that I don't need to have an emergency account. I don't need to have a rainy day fund. I don't need an emergency fund, whatever you want to call it, right? And this one is more of the, well, I know, hey, if something happens, like if I need to replace the water heater or the car breaks down, I'm just going to use my credit card because that'll take care of it. And that's fine if you're able to pay off that immediately. But if you're not able to pay it off immediately, then now we get into the bad debt situation.
Problem, Tom, is that, the average American has about $400 in savings, right? A lot of people live paycheck to paycheck. So if you're in that kind of situation and you have a major car repair, what do you do, right? So that's the dilemma that most Americans face.
Right. And the idea there is to start building up that balance, right? So Greg and I, we talk about this all the time about trying to, become better savers. And even if it's just something as simple as I'm putting, and we'll talk about this comes up later on too, $5 or $10 a paycheck away into an account, it's going to build up over time if I'm putting into something that I don't have access to, i.e. that savings account that's not tied to my checking account, into a CD or a money market that's not tied to my debit card that I can't get at it, you're going to build that up. And the pandemic taught us nothing if it wasn't that, like Craig said, everybody needs to be looking at and figuring out ways to get better with the amount that they have in their emergency reserve accounts. Carrying a balance on my credit card will improve my credit score. This is not true. So this is one of those, like, it's out there, it's rambling around, and no. So credit card, basically, it's okay if you have, like we just talked about, if you bought something or had to use the card to fix the car or whatever, and then you immediately paid it off. Yes, that's a good thing as far as your credit is concerned. Carrying a balance does not affect your credit score. It will not improve your credit score. It does nothing but create debt. So it's pay off the credit card. Don't carry a balance thinking, oh, well, that's what's going to help me improve my credit score. That doesn't work.
Right. You more or less want to be responsible with the credit, and then look at the amount of open credit that you have.
Correct. It's credit utilization. Very good. That is the point. It's credit utilization. It is not, I am carrying a balance, so that means I'm good. One of the things that you want with credit cards, the other is, sometimes people have multiple cards, and Craig and I always talk about the evil of credit cards and, trying to get rid of them. But if you've had a card and you've used it and then you paid it off, so it's got no balance on it, don't close it. It's part of your credit history. So the idea is keep it open and use it like infrequently, like, go out to dinner once every like 3 or 4 months and use that card, because that credit will continue, that rating will go. The minute you close it or cancel the card, it sort of wipes that off your table, if you will.
And what you really want to do is outsmart the credit card company, where you're getting those cards that give you some kind of bonus or incentive like air miles or cash back, and you're not ever paying them interest because you pay it off every 30 days.
Right.
So, it's how you're beating the system a little bit.
Yeah. All right. Paying your mortgage as soon or as fast as possible. Okay. So this is another one of those. And I think this is more the truism that came from our parents than anything else, that I want to pay this off. Let's face it, where your parents' interest rate was at 8 or 10 or 13%, right? I mean, so, okay, maybe they had a reason to want to do it. Nowadays, where you've had rates that have been down in the 3s, right? Where you've had low 3s, this is essentially money that's there's no drive here as far as I can see that says this is a good idea, because the only time that who's telling you to do this, right, Craig? Where's this mainly coming from?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. I mean, I think people instilled it, all debt's bad, right? We just talked about the fact that not all debt is bad, right? As you own the home, hopefully it's increasing in value over time, right? As your mortgage is going down. So there becomes a separation between the balance and the value at some point anyway, regardless of how quickly you pay it down. The other thing is people don't take into consideration is the time value of money.
Right.
Good example, my mother bought her house in 1980. Well, at the time she bought it for $30,000 and mortgage payment was $200 a month. Could you imagine if your mortgage payment was only $200 a month right now? So to buy the same house now, though, your mortgage would be like $3,000 a month.
Right.
So does it really matter if I paid off my $200 a month mortgage, 15 years ago? Or would it have been better to take the difference in that extra payment to pay it off sooner and put that money away so it's growing over time? Because what we've talked about before is that, the equity in your home, you can't just take a door off and go down to the street and buy something, right? Like you like to say. So in order to get cash out of your property, you now have to ask somebody for permission.
Right.
You have to finance something to get money out, or you have to sell the property.
And that's really where it comes. And that's where I was leading, which is basically the people who were telling you to pay it off early are the people holding the note. The bank.
They want their money back.
The bank is telling you this is the best way to do. This is the proper thing to do. This is the right way to go because they want the money. And then once they have the money, guess what? You've got this property, great. And you've got equity, like Craig just said, but you don't have access to it anymore. That's money that's now tied up in your property. You've got to either sell it or ask permission, take another note out, right? Which is either I'm taking a HELOC, some sort of home equity, or I'm doing a reverse mortgage if I'm old enough and in that situation. But tying it up into the property means you don't have access to that money anymore. And this might be money, especially if we have other debt or other situations or other concerns better suited to handle those than worrying about paying off the mortgage at this point. I have life insurance through my employer, so I'm all set. So here's the thing, as Craig mentioned about the point with the average person out there not having like $400 in the bank. The same thing's true with life insurance, right? The reality is most people only have access to life insurance through their employer, and they feel that, that's adequate and enough. The problem is if you leave your employer, you no longer have any coverage. And if it happens at a time later on, like when you're in your peak earning times in your 50s, and now you have some issue that precludes you from getting coverage, and the employer that you go to doesn't offer it or provide it, you don't have anything. So we're always recommending that you should look at having, like I like to call the philosophy of the CEO of you, right? You Inc., you're the CEO of you. You need to have a package that goes along with you as the CEO of you. And one of those packages is a life insurance policy that will cover whoever you need to have the responsible for if something happens to you and you are no longer alive.
The big thing here, Tom, is a lot of people don't even understand why they need life insurance or what role that plays in their overall personal financial picture. Right. Because it's more than just about, leaving money behind for your loved ones. It's also a tool that can be used to give you better leverage while you're alive. And that's a whole nother segment we can get into, but it's really something that you shouldn't just breeze over. It could be a very important part of your financial picture.
Right. I'll start saving after and fill in the blank, whatever it is, right? If I'm in my 20s, I've got student loans. I'm going to save for a home, or, we're saving, we're going to get married, we're going to have a baby, and, all of this stuff. It's always, and that's the picture on the screen is the savings train never getting into the station, because we're always telling ourselves we're going to do it down the road. I've got time. I've got plenty of time. I can, I'll save later. I can always catch up. What is that one with the grasshopper and the ant? Is that one where where the ant is the one who's putting all the food away and the grasshopper is the one playing all day? I'll get to it. I'll get to it.
Okay, I haven't heard that one. We keep going. I like the story.
Yeah, no, I think that's what it is. I think that's the story with the grasshopper and the ant. I'm just clicking on this as my brain is moving around here. But anyway, the idea is that, that train never gets into the station because we keep putting it off and putting it off. The idea there is that no, you need to start, because the one thing you can never get back is time. You can make up and the money you're putting in, but you can never get the time back. So wherever you are, it's to take the step back, look at your situation and say, hey, if I'm not putting money in X or Y or saving here or saving there, I need to start today so I can start building out and taking it and doing it in little increments, because otherwise you'll never get started.
The other thing too, we touched on a little bit earlier, Tom, was the fact that, managing money is about developing habits, just like managing any other part of your life, right? And if you never start the habit of saving, then you're never going to be able to develop it. It's always going to be like that one-off thing. I'll throw a bunch of money in, just like, exercising. It sounds great for 3 weeks at the beginning of the year, and then it doesn't become a habit, and so you don't keep doing it, right? So
it's like anything else in terms of forming that and making sure and doing it. And you're right. It's got to be something that you're building towards and building up towards. And a lot of times that's what we talk about with financial goals, is having those metrics and those markers on trying to save for something and building up little baby steps to get there, because that's what works over time. All right, so not sure if you got a plan, schedule a time to chat with us. You can, go drop right onto the calendar there. It's www.calendly.com/Moody Street. And you can schedule a time to chat with us. We're always happy to talk. We'll have more of our contact information at the end. That was sort of our halfway point there. Now we'll get into some of those investing falsehoods, right? And investing falsehoods, we're really talking about some of the stuff that goes on where, you're hearing chatter, or I like to call it the white noise out there. There's a lot of financial entertainers out there in the world, and, they're saying stuff, and sometimes it might be directed at a certain audience, but they're shooting it out into a broad spectrum. So it may or may not necessarily apply to you or your situation. And because this is, I'm sorry, I just love Ratatouille. So that's Gaston. And if you know the movie Ratatouille, he wrote the book. Anyone can cook, right? And so this one, the first one is that anyone can invest. And I think the pandemic and quarantine and the onslaught of Robinhood, and now all of the different crypto apps and software that's out there, sort of gives this like, yeah, anybody can do this, right? There's no, and yes, as an individual, you can certainly invest. We're never telling anyone not to. What we're telling you is to take a little bit of time and strategy to understand and learn all the nuances and the ins and outs and the terminology, and become familiar with everything before you take the leap. Because what's happened with Robinhood is they turned it into the gamification now. It's almost like it's like betting on games, basically, in terms of playing the investing, and that's not how that's supposed to be. So it's one of those, yes, everybody can, but you should have at least some basics and some basis and some understanding before you really start getting involved, because you can lose and lose badly.
I think it's about setting realistic expectations, right? So if I'm just starting to cook, I'm not going to make a souffle, right? I might start with scrambled eggs. The same thing with investing. You're not going to, be the guru of investing and get rich overnight. If you don't understand the basic principles of investing. And I think that's the big thing out there is, they say, oh, you can just start investing and then you'll be wealthy. You won't have to work anymore. Everybody's looking for that quick, the quick bullet, the quick fix. Investing, like anything, is, something that if you take it slow and steady, it can absolutely enhance your wealth. Right. But if you take, like you said, if you just go at it haphazard and just throw money in and hope it's going to just, take off, well, you really open yourself up to risk. And what we call that speculative investing, right? We just have no idea if you're going to get a return or not get a return. So
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and it segues right into the next one, which is, I don't have a lot, so it makes no sense to try and save, right? Sort of says the same thing there, which is, that's what happens for a lot of people, is like, like Craig said, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. So like, what's the point here? And it isn't that mindset. The mindset is no, if I can find a way to start putting at least something away on a regular basis, I'm going to build it up. Once I start building it up, I'll see I've made this leap. Now there's money in the bank. Now I can start thinking about directing it to something else, whether it's a retirement, whether it's education for the kid, whatever it is. And it builds up over time. But it's like Craig said, it's one of those, like you talk yourself out of it before you even get started, and then that habit carries on. And so it really is something that everybody needs to sort of look at and adopt, this idea of I can save.
Well, I think the other thing that happens too, Tom, as you hit on a little bit earlier, is if you don't have emergency reserves, then every time you get to save a little bit of money, something comes along and takes it away. Right. It seems like every time you make an extra buck, there's another bill. And so that can get extremely frustrating, and nobody likes to deal with frustration. So I think that's another reason why they kind of give up. I think what you got to do is stop and say, what is it you want your money to do for you? Right. And then like you said earlier, come up with some goals of, what could be a reasonable savings plan. Maybe you're not throwing in $1,000 a month. Maybe you're starting with $20 a month. Right. It's just starting somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the whole idea, and going through that. And then this is probably one of the bigger ones, which is it's about investing and only looking at things from a return perspective. Like, in our industry, Craig and I, we're terrible at this because everything you see talks about returns, right? We're the number one, or we're top 5, or we're the top 10, or, everything is return, return, return. And it's really not about return. It's about risk. And right now you're experiencing it, right? The market, we bounced back up today. So we're back in not correction territory now. I actually had a fairly good day today, but it's still risk, right? And so it's always about looking at what's the downside. Like Craig said, how much am I willing to risk for that return? And that's really what every investor needs to do. Because if you really look at it from that side of it, it's like, well, you mean if I was trying to get a 10% return, I have the possibility of actually losing, 30 to 40% of my money? I'm not sure I want to do that, right? So you got, there's a trade-off there, and you really need to be looking at it from the risk side of the perspective, and not just, hey, can tell me, what did it make last year, or what did it make over the last 3 years? That's chasing returns. And that goes back to the whole anyone can invest, because anybody could try to, bet on the winner and, never know what's going to happen.
Well, I mean, the same thing. I had someone I was talking to earlier this week, Tom, who, they were invested in the market at an early age, but every time the risk would get high, they'd jump out of the marketplace. Well, because they were invested beyond what we call their risk tolerance. They just weren't comfortable where they were with the ups and downs in the marketplace. So everybody would try to cookie cutter you based on your age and say, this is how you should be invested versus your situation and your tolerance for risk.
Correct. Right. And that is the biggest part of it, right? Is trying to figure out you as the individual. Like you said, that individual, every time they pull out, they miss, right? Okay, you may have missed a little bit of the downside, but you probably missed the bounce back. Right? We had a good bounce back today. If you had sat on the sidelines 2 days ago, you missed the bounce today. Right. So that's what happens with that. And a lot of times investors get whipsawed, right? They're trying to jump in, jump out, jump in, jump out. And it never works out in the end in terms of trying to do that. But if you figure out, like Craig said, that risk tolerance, your preference and what you can sleep at night and be comfortable with, that's what's going to matter, because then you're not going to be that worried about it. You're not going to be, get that sick feeling like, whoa, everything's down 25%. What did I do here? Where'd all my money go?
I think you've talked to the fact of how many times you have to miss that bounce up before it crushes your, overall portfolio.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
Like 3 or 4 misses.
It's 4 days, and if you miss the 4 best days in a 10-year window, your rate of return drops dramatically. Like if you got a 10% 10-year, average for 10 years, it drops down to 4.
Wow. And those big swings usually happen during those times when people pull out because they're worried about the risk.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by getting whipside. It's you're pulling out when, oh, it's, I'm getting out, and then next thing you know, it bounces, 3 days later.
Over 10 years, 4 days can make that big a difference. That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, 4 best days, but. All right. Trying to save without knowing how much you want to spend, or trying to save without knowing how much you spend.
I know how much
I got, this is me. Like I was raised on Mad Magazine for the audience there. That's Spy vs. Spy, the Alfred E. Noonan. Yeah, so the idea here is that you really need to figure out what you're spending. Now, Craig and I won't use the B word, right? Budget. I mean, it's not about budget. It's all about how you spend your money. That's what's more important than anything else. It's how you spend your money. So you're making sure you know where you're spending your money first. Then you have an idea of how much you can be saving. What happens for most people is they're trying to spend and save at the same time without really getting a handle on it. And that inevitably leads to frustration. It leads to overspending or oversaving, which can happen. And the lifestyle is not balanced. It's really about trying to find a balance between the two.
And like we talked about earlier, it's also trying to understand what is it you want your money to do for you. Because to say, well, your housing budget should be this, or your food budget should be that. Once again, that's really cookie cutter for each person's situation. However, if you're spending a lot of money on dining out and you're not enjoying it, but you'd rather be going on a vacation, that's something you would enjoy. Well, that's about prioritizing where you're spending your cash, not so the budget so much, but making sure you're getting out of your money what means the most to you.
Right. Yeah.
Is it stuff or is it experience?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is absolutely the case. And then the last one is, the 401k is the only way to save for retirement. Now, this was a whole presentation we did on the 401k and whether or not that's a good or bad thing. The reality is the 401k is just 40 years old. It's just literally clicked 40 years old as right now. So you raised a whole generation of people who have been told this is how you do it. Like they don't know what a pension is. They don't know what that's like. So it is a great tool from the perspective of a forced savings. There is pre-tax benefits to it. There's a lot that goes along with that. However, there are other factors that come in, specifically taxation later on in life. So options and ideas to use multiple strategies, i.e. bringing in, after tax, like a Roth account and other things that can offset and be used. So, what Craig and I like to say to everybody is it's more like having multiple buckets to generate the income in retirement than just plowing everything and focusing it all on the 401k, because ultimately that money, when it comes out, is taxable income. And the government's they're going to want their tax money, and it's all sitting there, and you're just at the whim of whatever the tax code says at that particular time when you go to draw it out.
Yeah, I mean, it should be one cog in your retirement wheel. It shouldn't be the whole wheel, right?
It's just a lot of times, right? We run into people where it's like they're just plowing everything into the 401k and not really thinking about anything else.
Well, they get the match and no one else they know is even doing any of that. And so they think that's exactly the right thing to do until you start trying to play out the retirement game we did the other night and all the different risk factors for, well, if it's all taxable, if you want to retire early, if you're forced with required minimum distributions. So like I said, it plays a role in retirement, but it shouldn't be the entire retirement package.
Right.
So I do have a question from our audience though, Tom. Someone's asking, can you explain over saving?
Yeah, so well, all right. So oversaving from the standpoint of you're trying to live your life today, right? So this would be somebody who's not spending anything, right? I'm shuttered in. I'm not spending. I'm saving for that rainy day. I'm just going to keep putting money away. We call it pack rat philosophy, right? In terms of going through that, the money type, that's what they are, and they don't spend today. So you're not living your life today. You're not enjoying your life today. And that can be just as harmful, just as stressful on you as, somebody who's doing the other thing, which we refer to as the money hippie, who's just, spending free will and not really thinking about what goes on later on in life. But that overspender, like the whole idea is I'm going to spend it someday, but that you just don't spend it at all, right?
Yeah.
You end up over saving.
People tend to park a lot of money into retirement because they're worried, when I stop working, I'm not going to be able to make any more money, which is true, right? The issue, though, is a lot of times they don't know how much they're parking and what they're going to need. So you're not doing that analysis of what do I need for a paycheck when I retire. And then once you know what you need, then you can try to make the most efficient decisions on how to make that happen so that you can have a robust and never-ending retirement from a financial standpoint, but still enjoy, what you want to do today. It's
Right.
that balance, like you just said, having that balance. How do I know where that balance should be? Because I don't know what the future is going to bring. And it's once again, that relationship with your money. I'm going to run out. I'm nervous. I'm not going to have it. It's not going to be there. Right.
So listen, there are money personalities. It's a great question because there are money personalities. Everybody's got, we don't sort of say a person is one type or the other. We broke it out. There were like 7 different money personalities we went through. And you probably tend to have a couple of different ones, in your makeup. But generally, there's one that will be the ultimate driver of how you're dealing with your money and your finances. I just went through 2 of them. One was, the pack rat, and one was the money hippie. But the idea there is you can get caught up in that, where the point is it almost becomes like this obsession, and it's not healthy anymore. That, oh, no, I can't spend anything because I got to put it away. I got to save it. I got to save it, and you're not really living, you're not enjoying your life now. And that's what can happen.
I mean, I've seen people squeezing ketchup packets into a bottle who retire and they got millions of dollars in the bank and never spend it.
Well, that's what it's carried forward. But see, that's the whole thing. It's carried on into later in life, even though you told yourself later on I was going to spend it. And now you're not, because you've built up the habit, you've built up the personality where you can't spend it because you just don't feel like it's ever going to be enough. I've got to keep putting it away,
Right. You save for a rainy day and it's pouring and you're still not using it. Right.
Correct. All right. So what can you do to help yourself? Right. So, Craig and I always recommend going out and reading, certainly, picking up some books. There's a couple of books out there. One's called The Cash Flow Quadrant, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Any of the Kiyosaki books, Robert Kiyosaki with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, those type of things. There's a lot of different ones that talk about some of this relationship with money. Another, if you're not a reader, listen to podcasts, right? The Wealth Formula podcast, that's a pretty good one. You can just, tune in, and just as you're tooling around in the car, if you're, traveling now, or, as far as the job, any commuting going on. The real estate guys, I'm not too much into real estate, but I know that's a popular one as far as that's concerned. One of the things you can do to help yourself, because if you are participating in a retirement plan, then you're getting a statement. And if you're not getting it mailed to you, if it's coming electronically and you're just, glancing at it, spend some time with it. Understand what's happening. Look at the breakdown. What did you have in there? What did you put in there? What did the performance happen on those? How many shares were they buying? Start to get some of that language and lingo down to really get a sense of it, which then to get some experience to then say, okay, now I can go play with Robinhood. Once I have a piece and a part where I'm understanding what it is I'm buying, large cap, small cap, mid cap, international, emerging market, whatever the case may be, but I'm understanding what that is and why I'm buying it and why I want to hold it. And then always keep asking questions, right? And that's another one. Always, be reaching out and talking to people. What are they doing? What are you doing? What have their experiences been? I'm always a big believer of picking somebody's brain, right, Craig?
Yeah, absolutely. Even as long as we've been doing this, Tom, there's stuff we learn every day about this business that we didn't know before, because it keeps changing. The rules keep changing. The markets keep changing. Opportunities keep changing. So, even us, there is no dumb question, right? Because there's just so many things. It's impossible to know everything. So
one of the things I say for especially somebody who's whether you want to call them a newcomer, a newbie, or just somebody trying to get their whatever the cliche, get your feet wet, that type of thing with it, right? If you're going to open like an E-Trade or some sort of low cost brokerage type account, pick a couple of stocks that you like. By that, I mean companies you're familiar with, that you're comfortable with, that you know. The one I always use is Disney. It's one of those things. It's there. You can always use Disney, right? But if you have, a certain company or an affiliation to a company or something that you like, follow that stock. Look at that. Do some research on it, read about it, figure it out, hear what they're saying about it, and then that'll give you some of the idea and concept of, well, gee, I get that for Amazon or Apple or any of the major corporations out there. Now, if I start bringing that down to a smaller company, what's similar about it? What do they say? What is the wording? How does that all work?
It's like to say you own Disney. That's all you own.
No. So, no. So Disney.
I own a part of Disney. That's right. When I'm here, I'm an owner.
You just want to say, yeah, like, right? That's what you can do with anything, but I mean, it's just one of those. So for everybody, what we try to do is help everybody sort of go through this, right? Sort of get an idea and an understanding of where you're trying to get to, go through some of these things and figure it out, what you're trying to do. We do that by offering an opportunity to sit down with us, because like we talked about, one of the biggest things that came out of this was, hey, you need to, if you're going to set a goal, you need to have that goal, and you also need to have a plan to put it in place. Because a goal without a plan is just hope, and hope never happens. So, I don't know why that didn't work. Yeah, just drop yes in the chat box. Craig, you got your the link?
I do. Yeah, I can drop
So if you
it.
just drop it in, Craig's dropping his calendar link in there. You can just pick on that and find a time that works if you're interested in terms of going through it. I gave you the link earlier in the session as well. This is Craig and I in our more formal attire, and we are as excited as anybody that TB12 has announced he is unretired, coming back. And so, yes, we get to keep our those are custom jerseys for us when we're out and about, but our custom TB12 jerseys for another season until he actually retires again. And then by that time, we'll figure out where we're going with it all. What's on tap? We're keeping the drinking theme going here with Think with a Drink. So next week, we're going to do the panini generation. So understand, you've always heard it as the sandwich generation, where I'm trying to deal with taking care of the kids, and I'm trying to deal with taking care of the parents. Well, I'm a full-blooded Italian, so in today's market, in today's world, that just seems to be tighter and tighter and tighter. So it's a panini, it's a squeezed sandwich now, so it gets a little bit tighter. And then on the 31st, we're going to how to talk to kids about money. So some of the things and some of the ways to like help any of your children, and those children may now be adults and may be in their early 20s and still need to have a talking to about it. So we'll do some of that in terms of going through it. And then the last one is that, again, you can go to the website, ariesfoundation.org. You can reach out in an email. It's info@ariesfoundation.org. But if you go to the website, there's also a contact us or how to get a hold of us. So we're happy to do that. Craig, any other questions in the chat box?
I have no other questions in the chat box at this time.
Okay, then I'm going to say for everybody, what is that? Erin Gobra, right? It's St. Patrick's Day. Have a wonderful rest of the evening.